want something, go get it. Period. You got a dream, you got to protect it. People can't do something themselves. They want to tell you you can't do it. You want something, go get it. Period.
Good Monday afternoon. Welcome and everybody to the JD Sports Show live on 12 Ounce Sports. My apologies, connection issues floundered the first attempt at our show, but nonetheless, technology could not beat me. I have risen to the occasion and we are back live finally for the JD Sports Show on 12 Ounce Sports. Welcome in. Happy Monday, everybody. Thank you for listening to today's show. I hope that the next 54 minutes we can get a connection that is not a problem like we saw there. So again, my apologies for that. But we're back and we're live and we're ready to go. So let's get underway today with lots to talk about in the hour. We're going to talk about NFL Week 5. My Lions didn't play, so you don't have to hear me rant for the first 30 minutes about that. Excuse me. Apologies for that. We're going to talk. The Lakers won the NBA championship. Talk about how I am apparently Nostradamus with that. I'm going to talk about MLB playoffs. They are in the championship series for the American League and National League, so just 4 teams remain there. So we got a lot to talk about. We're also going to talk a little bit about college football as well this past week and the future of college football. Some things got announced today that we're going to talk about as well. So let's get going. Start off with some somber news this afternoon on the JD Sports Show. Hall of Fame infielder and longtime commentator, color commentator for Sunday Night Baseball. Joe Morgan passed away today at the age of 77. Joe was, well, I guess it depends what kind of generation. I mean, for me, I really knew him as the Sunday Night Football color guy. but for a lot of people, they probably knew him as the Hall of Fame second baseman for the Cincinnati Reds. Was considered one of the best all around, just genuine people in the game of baseball. Loved by many who played with him and against him. And as far as from my perspective, I really, really enjoyed his time on Sunday Night Baseball. It was his voice that you could just, it would just feel like Sunday Night Baseball for a lot of those years. And Joe Morgan passes away at the age of 77 today. So rest in peace to him. Thoughts and prayers to him and his family. And wish the best for all the Morgans. And Joe will forever be remembered as a Hall of Fame player and a Hall of Fame person. Speaking, let's continue on with the kind of somber news. Yesterday in the Cowboys and Giants game, you probably have heard and you may have even seen Dak Prescott dislocated and separated his ankle in that game, was tackled late in the game on a designed QB run. Was tackled and just kind of fell awkwardly down. Sometimes in those tackles, your leg or your ankle gets kind of caught underneath when you're coming down, and then it kind of just gets compressed. And unfortunately, that happened to Dak yesterday against the Giants. No timetable yet, but a lot of people feel like he is done for the year. Just a terrible injury. The emotion that was on Dak Prescott's face as he was being carted out told the whole story. Here's a guy who is, I really believe, if not for Dak Prescott, the Cowboys probably are winless right now. He has kept them in every game that they've been in. Their defense has been absolutely atrocious. That didn't change yesterday. Their defense is, I think they have the worst defense in the NFL. And Dak Prescott's had to continuously just use his arm to keep the Cowboys in games. And they've now won 2 games. Of course, Andy Dalton had to come in the game. He had a lead to come back himself. The Cowboys won 37-34. Andy Dalton had a lead to come back this time. But just terrible for Dak. I am no fan of the Cowboys. I will be the first to admit that. But I've always really liked Dak Prescott. I think he's always been a really good person. And I think he gets a lot of criticism because he's on the Cowboys, right? And I think that media is going to attack. It's like kind of like the New York media in baseball. It's like that, but with Dallas. I mean, Dallas is always going to be under a much larger and finer microscope than other NFL teams. And I think Dak sometimes catches a little bit of heat. I'm not saying I don't think he's the best quarterback in the league, but I think he's a much better quarterback than some people give him credit for. And I think he's been kind of proving that this year, having to use his play to keep the Cowboys in games. Again, without him, they're probably winless right now. But to see that emotion, I mean, of course, if you don't know, Dak Prescott, his brother, killed himself earlier this year. And Dak has went through a very rough year mentally and, of course, now also physically. And it kind of felt like you were just watching that emotion as he was being carted off the field. It was emotion of, I think a lot of people might have assumed it was, and maybe it was a little bit of the pain, but I don't think that was necessarily pain that he was tearing up about. I think that was just emotions of the rough year it's been for Dak. He knows that, and look, every player knows that you're one injury away from never playing again. And look, I think that that Dak will be okay. He's going to work his tail off. I think they're going to give him the ability to have another chance. But you just never know. At the time when it happened, you don't know what's going through his mind. He might be thinking, was that the last time I took a snap? You never know. That's the things you go through. And again, I think the emotions of what this year has been for Dak Prescott with his brother, and he talked about how COVID, all the COVID stuff really ramped up his anxiety. Mental health is a very real thing. It was frustrating earlier this year when Skip Bayless, whether he wants to admit it or not, basically called Dak Prescott weak for showing depression, and basically said Dak Prescott wasn't the leader for that, which I still don't know to this moment how Skip Bayless has a job. He should not have a job, and I really believe he should not have a job. His apology was as weak as what he said. It was not an apology. I'm sure Dak doesn't care, and that's fine. Um, but as somebody who also deals with mental health issues, it's frustrating to hear that people still believe that mental health is a weakness, and it's not at all. Uh, everybody goes through different things, and everybody goes through life and handles life differently. So it's frustrating sometimes when some who may not have to deal with that on a daily basis feel like that's a weakness. So I just want to say quickly, thoughts are with Dak. I really hope that he gets better, and I hope that if it's not this year that he gets back on the field, I hope he comes back out as strong as ever next year. I'm sure the Cowboys will, and they've got a lot of questions now. Back to kind of the football side of things, they have to figure themselves out as well. The question now becomes for the Cowboys: do they want to ride with Andy Dalton or do they go make a trade? There are two quarterbacks, excuse me, just in the last 10, 12 hours that have already been popped up as possible targets for the Cowboys. Now, I look, I think Andy Dalton, it was probably, you're talking about, and look, you can say what you want about Andy Dalton, but he was probably one of the best backup quarterbacks you could have had in that situation. A guy with a lot of experience, playoff experience, but now the Cowboys have to ask themselves, okay, is this a guy that we feel like can carry us the rest of the way? Because we are only, some teams 4 or 5 games in, and most teams are 5 games in. And that there's a lot of season left. And if Dak Prescott cannot come back in 2020, you've got to ask, Jerry Jones and that team has to ask, do they believe Andy Dalton could be the guy? The good news is you can probably give Andy a couple of games before you have to decide that. Now, even though the Cowboys' record isn't great, don't forget they play in the NFC East, which is the worst division in football. So they can give Andy a couple of weeks to go out there and say, hey, you have a couple of weeks now to prove yourself, to show that you can be the starting quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys that can help us get to the playoffs. Now, to the two quarterbacks that I mentioned, there was 2 quarterbacks that have already been linked to possibly, not linked, I don't want to say that, but 2 quarterbacks that have already been kind of thrown out there as hey, could these guys be the guys? And one of them hits close to home, but the other one I think is interesting. So the first one is Sam Darnold, the quarterback of the Jets. There are a lot of people who feel like the Jets are not going to win very many games this year, but there are a lot of people who feel like the Jets maybe are leaning towards, knowing that they're going to probably get the first pick in the draft, that they may be leaning towards drafting Trevor Lawrence with the number 1 pick next year, which would mean that Sam Darnold, who they took a couple of years ago very high in the draft in 2018, would then be out of a job. But of course, you also, I think if thinking along with the Jets here, if you really feel like you're not going to move along with Sam Darnold in your future, then trading him now would make sense, right? Because if you show that he's a backup, his value will drop. But as right now he's a starter, and there could be several teams who maybe want Sam Darnold, but right now there's no team more interested probably than the Dallas Cowboys, if they are interested, right? Again, it really depends on what the Cowboys want to do, because we could all be thinking this, and they're sitting up there because thinking, no, Andy Dalton's our future. But again, we're just kind of playing along with the game here, and it is fun to think about. Could the Dallas Cowboys, would they think about swinging a big trade for one of these guys? So kind of thinking along here with the Jets. If you really do feel like Sam Darnold's not your future, and that's not for me to decide, but if you're the Jets organization and you feel like you're probably going to get the first pick, which most likely they will, and you don't feel like Sam Darnold's your future, and you're going to go draft Trevor Lawrence, then yeah, I mean, it would make sense to trade him because, again, his value is going to be higher now than if you sit him on the bench. If you're the Cowboys side of this, I don't. Can you really sit there and say Sam Darnold's better option than Andy Dalton? I mean, you're talking about a guy. Look, even if Dak Prescott's out for the rest of this year, Dak Prescott's still going to come back. So if you trade for a Sam Darnold, the problem with that is then okay, probably not. What do you do with him next year, right? Would he be a guy that you just kind of let go, or would you trade again? But when I think about that, you're kind of again you're thinking about it between Andy Dalton because that right now is the starting quarterback, and in my opinion, with the experience that Andy Dalton has compared to the very little experience that Sam Darnold has, I would say no. I would say Andy Dalton is a better option right now for the Cowboys than Sam Darnold. This isn't a trade that you're thinking about that's going to cover you for the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years. This is a rest of the year deal. So for me, I would say no. Now this next player that was brought up hits close to home and is I think a much more interesting debate, and that would be Matthew Stafford of the Lions. Now let's look at it again from both sides. So from the Lions' perspective, they're 2-4. They had a bye week this week. And they're most likely, and I've said this week after week, they're not going to do anything. And that's not because of Matthew Stafford. That's just because of the coaching staff, which, by the way, speaking of that, and I forgot to talk about it, we'll actually get to it in a little bit about the Falcons situation. But two big coaches have been fired already, and somehow Matt Patricia's a head coach. But nonetheless, the Lions probably aren't going to do anything this year. So from the Lions' perspective, you have to be thinking about how much can this hurt and help us. So for the Lions, sorry, I'm all over the place inside my head right now, trying to think about this from every different angle. From the Lions' perspective, it would make sense this year, but it doesn't really make sense for the future, right? Because unless you feel like there's a quarterback in this upcoming draft not named Trevor Lawrence, because the Lions will not get the first pick, not named Trevor Lawrence, you feel like can come in and be your future, it really doesn't make a lot of sense. Because even if you get, let's say they get the first round pick of the Cowboys, you're not going to get that high of a draft pick. I mean, the Cowboys are probably going to win that division and be in the playoffs, so you're talking about mid 20s. So, that it's not, you're going to have a higher pick than them. So it's not like you would be using that pick in turn to go get your franchise quarterback, right? Because the Cowboys aren't going to have a top 5 pick. They're going to have probably mid-20s. So you can't really think of it that way. And for the Lions, remember Matthew Stafford is also under a big contract. He signed a big deal a few years ago, which also might kind of steer away the Cowboys because, I would assume, well, I guess it depends. I feel like if the Lions probably want some big return, they would probably have to take on the majority of that contract versus if they ate the majority of that contract, they would probably get some stuff in return. I guess it would just depend on how they would want to do that. I can't, as a Lions fan, it just wouldn't make much sense to me for the Lions to do this trade because I just don't feel like I just can't imagine they'd get anything back that would make me feel like, okay, I think they did a good deal. Because, again, you can give them all the draft picks you want, but the Cowboys aren't going to have a high draft pick. They're always going to be a later draft pick. They're never going to be a top 5 worst team. They're just not. So you're not going to be guaranteeing yourself a top 5 pick. Really, is there any players that they're going to give you that are really worth it? I don't think so. Unless you're going to give me CeeDee Lamb and Ezekiel Elliott. Really, outside of that, you're not really going to give me anything that I feel like is warranted. You're talking about a guy, Matthew Stafford, who is and has been your franchise quarterback. Now, yes, I will admit, look, Matthew Stafford's not going to be the franchise quarterback 5-10 years down the road. He is coming towards the end of his leg, but I still believe, and I've said this on the show, I still believe Matthew Stafford has some really good elite level years left in him. Which is why and I understand why he's enticing to the Cowboys because he is, remember when I did the Sam Darnold, Andy Dalton comparison? Well, now, if you're talking from the Cowboys' perspective of, do we want Matthew Stafford or Andy Dalton? I would say, yeah. Realistically, yeah. I would assume the Cowboys all day, every day would love to have Matthew Stafford because they know that he has warranted success. Now, I know people will bring up the postseason, but again, you look at Stafford's postseason numbers; they're very good. It's been the defense's fault almost every time he's made the playoffs that they have lost games. And you put him in that offense with a better line, better offensive line, Ezekiel Elliott, Mark Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup. I mean, with that team around him, of course, Matthew Stafford, it's funny, right? He'd probably be going from the second worst defense to the worst defense. Look, if I'm the Cowboys, forget about the quarterback situation. They need defensive help. And I said this off air when the Jamal Adams trade happened. I really felt like the Cowboys should have gotten Jamal Adams. That made perfect sense for them. They needed the help. He was a Dallas guy. He had there was talks about him before, or Earl Thomas. Thomas also would have made sense. But Jamal Adams, I think, would have made more sense because of the youth, and you get him for a longer period of time. They can sit there and debate quarterbacks all day they want. I understand that, but they need to be looking for defensive help. I mean, you want to talk about what the Cowboys need? They need defense. Because I really do believe Andy Dalton is going to be fine. I think he can give them enough to win games. But the problem is, can he give them enough for that defense? And that's where I kind of go, Because if Dallas had a decent defense, I think Andy Dalton, I think they'd be perfectly okay. And I'm wondering, and you wonder, if that's maybe why they might go into panic mode and might go get a quarterback because they may feel like they don't have a defense capable to, win games with a quote-unquote game manager sort of quarterback like Sam Darnold, which is why Matthew Stafford makes sense. A gunslinger, great arm, great passer, guy that has had tons and tons of comebacks, a guy that's been in those situations. He would know that. Andy Dalton, can you really rely on Andy Dalton week after week to bring you back 2-3 scores in the air? I don't know. And again, that's why if I'm the Cowboys, I would give Andy Dalton at least a couple of weeks to show that he can do it. But he already did it once. I mean, he had to. They were losing against the Giants when he in that game. He had to lead them back, and they won. So he made that great pass to, which was probably even a better catch, to Michael Gallup down the sideline, which sealed the deal. So when I watching that game, I felt like Andy Dalton was capable enough. Again, it was a very small sample size, but look, they brought him in as to be probably one of the best backups in the NFL for a reason, in case something happened. And at the time, I remember, everybody seemed to laugh at that, but now it looks pretty smart because Andy Dalton is a really solid backup. Now, another guy that could come to mind is maybe Tyrod Taylor. Right, Tyrod lost his job and is going to lose his job in LA because of that crazy puncture situation. And Anthony Lynn said Justin Herbert's their quarterback going forward, so Tyrod Taylor could be a guy that could be thought of down the road as well. I don't know. To me, if I'm the Cowboys, I would be worrying about my defense. Because I think Andy Dalton can win them games, but if their defense keeps giving up 30-plus points a game, it's going to be hard for anybody. I mean, look, Dak Prescott couldn't always lead him back. They were asking a very tall task. You can't keep asking your offense to come back from 2-3 scores every single week. That's just not going to happen. So, Cowboys, let Andy Dalton do his thing. Go get defense. You need defensive help badly. Let's take a look around the league. Week 5 scores. Thursday night, the Bears beat the Buccaneers 20-19. I will pound the table. I do not think the Bears are a good team. I do not care that they're 4-1. They are not a good team. I think the Buccaneers beat the Bears 8 out of 10 times. It just happened to be one of those nights where they didn't. To be fair, Tampa did not play a very great game. And that's on the Buccaneers. But I don't know. It bothers me that the Bears are 4-1 because they are not a 4-1 team. But hey, you know what? Maybe they'll keep proving me wrong. The Texans finally won their first game past the Bill O'Brien era. Surprise, surprise. They crushed the Jaguars 30-14. Eric Bieniemy, the offensive coordinator for the Chiefs, I think is the perfect fit for the Texans. I really do. I think that the Texans should go hard for Eric Bieniemy. He has proven. Look, Andy Reid said last year when Eric Bieniemy didn't get a job that it was the biggest mistake those teams could have made. He didn't understand it. I mean, he was happy because he got him back for another year. And even Patrick Mahomes was on the record saying he had no idea how Eric didn't become a head coach. I mean, these players and these coaches have raved about this guy. And the reason it makes perfect sense is because it would kind of be going into a not nearly as good of a situation as Kansas City, but Houston has a franchise quarterback in Deshaun Watson, and he just needs help. He needs help around him, and he needs a coach. I think Eric Bieniemy would be the perfect fit for Houston to go with Deshaun Watson to help revamp that team, get somebody in there to GM that's not named Bill O'Brien to help give Deshaun some weapons, give him an offensive line, and that Texans team can be good. I mean, look, they don't have to revamp everything in Houston. This offseason, if they go out, get a couple of weapons, another offensive lineman or two, maybe some help on the defensive side, and they hire the right coach, Houston's going to be right back in it next year. They're not that far off. It's not like they have to go into rebuild mode, which is, again, another reason why I think it's enticing for a coach like Eric Bieniemy, because he knows he has a franchise quarterback there, and I think it'd be the perfect fit. Baltimore, ever since they lost in against Kansas City, seems like people have forgotten that Baltimore's still a pretty good team. They beat up the Bengals 27-3. Lamar Jackson, a couple of more touchdown passes. He did have a pick, but he was good again. Lamar, I feel like purposefully is just kind of doing his own thing right now. I don't think he wants the media attention, and that's not because he doesn't crave it or anything. I just think I think that Kansas City loss kind of made that team go, okay, you know what? We're still not quite there, but we feel like we're a good team. Let's just go out, and they've beaten down their opponents since that Kansas City game. They're going to come back around, and I would not be surprised if Baltimore and Kansas City is the AFC Championship game. And just don't sleep on the Ravens. They're a good team. The Panthers beat the Falcons 23-16, and I mentioned earlier the tease of two head coaches have been fired. We already talked about Bill O'Brien. Now Dan Quinn has been fired as well, the head coach of the Falcons. They've also fired their GM. That's the second team to do so, the Texans, and now the Falcons. It should have been 30 teams. The Detroit Lions, what are you doing? After another loss, they start the season 0-5. I've said this last week. I think if Detroit loses in Arizona and they're 0-4 into the bye week, they probably fire Matt Patricia, but because they came out that win in Arizona, we still have him as head coach. But the Panthers, how about the Panthers? 3 in a row. The Carolina Panthers, and without Christian McCaffrey, by the way, I mean, they are winning these games. And I'm not saying Christian McCaffrey is the reason, but they're 3-0 without CMC. Mike Davis, their backup running back, has been phenomenal for Carolina since coming in. And Teddy Bridgewater has looked really good these last 3 weeks. Watch out. Carolina is kind of a sneaky team in the South with, Tampa and New Orleans kind of being up and down, up and down. Carolina's right there in the South. Biggest upset of Week 5, the Raiders just walloped offensively. They beat the Chiefs 40-32. I could not believe. I mean, the way I watched the first half of that game, and it felt like Kansas City was going to win that game by 2 or 3 scores, and Las Vegas just turned the Jets on in the second half, both offensively, especially offensively, but also defensively. And John Gruden has beaten 2 really good teams in New Orleans and Kansas City. The Raiders are now 3-2. The Chiefs are 4-1. But Las Vegas is a very interesting team, and remember that was also a division game. So now the Raiders are only a game back in the division, and they have a win over Kansas City. So that could be big down the road. Las Vegas is a very sneaky good team, kind of like Baltimore. I mean, I don't think they get a lot of talk, but Las Vegas could make a very interesting run in the playoffs. The Cardinals got back on track after losing 2 in a row. They destroyed the lonely Jets 30-10, although it's kind of hard to place yourself where you're at when you play the Jets. But at least, for the Cardinals, they beat them. So the Jets, who I'm on the campaign for, I hope they go 0-16, are now 0-5. The Cardinals are 3-2. The Steelers beat the Eagles 38-29 yesterday. That was a pretty good game. Look, the Eagles are fighters. They are proving that, look, I know that everybody wants to make fun of them, but for the team that they throw out there every week, which is a beaten and bruised and just who's, they play really good teams very well. And they gave Pittsburgh, who is undefeated now, 5-0, everything they had, 38-29. Chase Claypool, 4 touchdown catches. He was a beast yesterday, and he looks like once again the Pittsburgh Steelers picked up a gem late round with a wide receiver. The Rams beat the Washington football team 30-10. Just kind of a quiet ho-hum day for the Rams, scoring 30 points. Sean McVay's Rams now are 4-1. The Washington football team falls to 1-4. Kyle Allen was hurt in that game, so Alex Smith, for the first time since his gruesome injury last year, came out and played. When he was sacked by Aaron Donald, I think everybody in the world was kind of gasping for air a little bit, and he got up fine. It was really just kind of crazy kind of cool to see those pictures of his family up in the stands. That was just a really cool moment. Awesome for Alex. I know that that obviously you don't hope for anything, but I'm sure nobody in the world wanted to get back on that football field more than Alex after everything he went through last year. Really happy for him. I know he didn't play phenomenally, but I don't think he cared. I think just to be back on that football field for him was enough. Another big surprise yesterday, not only did the Dolphins beat the 49ers, they blasted the 49ers 43-17. Jimmy G was benched. CJ Beathard came in that game. The 49ers look, to be fair to them, they have had injuries all over the place, especially defensively. They are just decimated on that side of the ball, which shows when you give up 43 points. But offensively, they're not doing real well either. I mean, Jimmy G came back and he got sacked 6 times and he threw a pick and he just didn't look good. Look, the defending NFC champions are in trouble. Very likely they may not even make the playoffs. Could just be kind of one of those, they just want to get the year over with kind of years. Every once in a while, a team just has one of those years where you just have a ton of injuries and you just want to get through the year and get to next year so you have a full healthy squad. It kind of feels like that for the 49ers. Again, the Cowboys beat the Giants 37-34. The Browns, how about the Cleveland Browns, folks? 4-1. They beat the Colts, a very good Colts team, 32-23. I tell you what, Cleveland, I think you might have a team that's going to be a very good, that NFC or AFC North. Everybody wanted to talk about the NFC West. The AFC North might be the toughest division because you have an undefeated Steeler team and a 4-1 Raven and Brown team. I mean, there are 3 teams in that division who are within a game of each other. That is a really good division. Look, Cincinnati's not a great team, but the Bengals are going to give those teams good games. I mean, they played Cleveland really well. They played Baltimore well. I mean, they're going to be a tough out in the North. So, because now the NFC West with 49ers kind of looking out of it, I don't really know what's going on with Arizona. You take away Seattle and LA, it's kind of the AFC North might now be the toughest division in football. And by the way, I was listening to Dan Orlovsky talk this morning on the Pat McAfee show about Phillip Rivers and the Colts. I agree with him. He basically said that he feels like Phillip Rivers is actually a problem for the Colts. I agree. I watched that game, the Colts and Browns game. Phillip Rivers just does not seem to fit that team. He's a loose cannon, and the Colts want to play defense with good offense. And Phillip Rivers is not that kind of a quarterback. He's a gunslinging, take risk. I mean, he's basically been on paper saying, I might throw a couple, picks, but I'm only going to come back out there. I just don't think that's kind of the style the Colts want. They're not going to bench Phillip yet. But remember, Jacoby Brissett, who's a pretty good quarterback, is on their bench. By the way, Dallas might be looking at Jacoby Brissett. But before Dallas gets to him, Indianapolis might want to just think about doing that switch. And last night, Sunday Night Football, the Seattle Seahawks played the Vikings and won 27-26. A last-ditch 4th-and-goal effort pass from Russell Wilson to DK Metcalf sealed the deal for the Seahawks. After looking just about as bad as they could in the first half, they played really well in the second half. They go to 5-0, and the Minnesota Vikings, maybe the most surprising team at being bad, they're now 1-4. I mean, there were a lot of people who were picking them to win the division. They're now 1-4 and in a lot of trouble. Monday night game tonight, Saints and Chargers at 8:15. I'll go Saints by 5. And then there's a Tuesday night game, tomorrow night, Bills and Titans. I'm going to go Bills. I like the Bills a lot. I'm going to go Bills by 3. So Saints by 5, Titans by 3. We'll take a quick break here on the JD Sports Show. Coming up next, we'll talk about the Lakers winning the championship, MLB postseason, and college football.
Drinkade, ready for distribution worldwide.
The official theme song of the JD Sports Show is Odyssey by Scorch featuring Austin Tenick. You can go listen to Odyssey and more songs over on SoundCloud by Scorch. Thank you to Scorch and Austin Tenick for the official theme song Odyssey of the JD Sports Show. Thank you to our sponsor, the Fields Golf Course. Make sure to visit their website, thefieldsgolfcourse.com, now to book a tee time and for future availabilities. Get it now while the fall golf is still available. The Fields Golf Course located in Ithaca, Michigan. We've got sports pretty much back every day now, and if you want to support the 12-ounce sports team, there's an easy way to get in on the action. 12-ounce sports is going to hook you up with a crazy deal when you sign up and make your first deposit on mybookie.ag. When you make that first deposit on mybookie.ag, they'll match your first deposit up to $1,000 when you punch in the promo code 12-ounce sports. That's 12OZ sports, all caps, no spaces, when signing up on mybookie.ag. To get your deposit matched up to $1,000. Remember, always gamble responsibly. Congratulations to the Los Angeles Lakers. They won their 17th franchise championship last night in 6 games over the Miami Heat. LeBron has won his 4th NBA championship. You may want to go back a couple of weeks because I did predict on this show that the Los Angeles Lakers would beat the Miami Heat in 6 games for the NBA championship. So you're welcome for that. All you bettors out there on mybookie.ag, hopefully you followed my advice and picked the Lakers in 6 because that's what happened. After a really tough and tooth and nail, wire to wire Game 5 that the Heat had to endure to get to Game 6, they just looked tired. I mean, they just looked like a team that gave pretty much everything they had in Game 5. And the Lakers just were never, and that game was, the Game 6 was never really close. I mean, it was a 15, 20, 30-point margin almost all game. Tip of the hat, though, to the Heat. I mean, look, the Heat were the 5 seed. Very, very young, unchallenged team. Jimmy Butler, hats off to him. He really showed that, if he got with the right team, I mean, he said for years, get me in the right situation and I will show you what I have. We were waiting for that. He finally showed that he was truly being honest. He got with the right team, right situation. Eric Spoelstra, I think, is one of the most underrated coaches in NBA. What he has done with the Heat for a lot of years, but especially this year more so than not, deserves a ton of credit. The Heat deserve a lot of credit. I mean, I don't think anybody probably picked them to go to the NBA Finals, and let alone push the Lakers to 6 games. Really impressive by them. They were really good. And I'll tell you what, the Miami Heat are going to be dangerous because, again, they're young. They are really young. Tyler Hero, who is, I think coming into his own, is 20 years old. And I think that's another reason why hang on to your cards because I think Tyler Hero is going to be a superstar. I really do. He's only 20 years old. He's just starting to kind of figure the game out. We saw this year. He's going to be really good. Former Michigan Wolverine Duncan Robinson proved he's a star. To keep Jimmy Butler around, I think the Heat are going to be dangerous. I think the Miami Heat in 2021 are going to pose a possible threat to be back to the NBA championships. But also, yes, congratulations to the Lakers. You can say what you want about the championship, the Mickey Mouse ring, all that, but they still had to do what they had to do. They still had to. Everybody went to the bubble. They didn't do it any differently than anybody else. They still had to play in the bubble. They had to play the teams they had to play. They had to play a really good Nuggets team. They had to play a really good Miami Heat team. And look, LeBron played extremely well in the bubble. Anthony Davis played extremely well. By the way, I'm really happy for Anthony Davis. This is his first ring. Dwight Howard gets a ring. Rajon Rondo gets his second ring. And, of course, LeBron gets his fourth ring. So congratulations to the Lakers, 2020 bubble champions. And now we just await to see when the next season will start. There was talks that it would start in December. And then Adam Silver said, no, it probably won't start till January at the earliest. So now we're just kind of in limbo. The NBA draft is this week, this Friday. The NBA draft is October 16th. So just like that, the future of the LaMelo Ball and Anthony Edwards and others will be drafted on Friday night. Don't want to miss that on ESPN, the NBA draft. And again, we'll just wait to see how long. I'm sure all the Lakers and Heat, they've got to be so excited to just go back home. I mean, being in that bubble for these last couple of months, not being able to leave, it's got to feel so rewarding for them when they leave that bubble. Whether that be, I don't know if they're going to leave it today or when, but I'm sure that's going to be awfully nice for them to leave. College football discussion now. I want to talk. First thing I want to talk about is LSU, because that's where we're going to start with the college football discussion today. LSU, I think a lot of people, I think every reasonable person, I think even reasonable LSU fans knew that they were not going to probably be a top. I don't even know if anybody reasonably thought they could I think maybe there was some people who thought they could push themselves in the playoffs again, but I personally felt like, I'll speak for myself, I felt like they were going to probably be a top 10, top 15 team, because I just felt like they lost so much talent and that they just weren't going to go back to the playoffs. But I thought they still were going to be a top 10, top 15 team. But how wrong was I, and how wrong was probably a lot of people? Not only is LSU not a top 10 team, they're not a top 15, not a top 20, not even top 25. They have fallen out of the AP polls after losing back-to-back weeks, including losing to an 0-2 Missouri team. The LSU Tigers, the defending national champions, are no longer in the AP poll. And now we're starting to trying to wonder, what are they? Because I don't know. I mean, LSU's defense is horrendous. I don't think their offense is that bad. I don't think Miles Brennan, their new quarterback, is that bad. But their defense is awful. And Ed Orgeron said himself, the head coach for LSU after the game, basically just trashed his defense for that weak performance against Missouri. It's bad. Things are bad in LSU right now. I mean, they could still corral themselves and end up in the top 25. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But with a full SEC schedule now this year, remember there's no free quote-unquote wins. And after the way they look to an 0-2 Missouri team, LSU's in trouble. They are in trouble with their schedule. And, boy, LSU has got some work to do if they want to even make a bowl game. Speaking of SEC, how about Ole Miss? They gave Alabama everything they had. Lane Kiffin, the former Nick Saban disciple, came into. They actually went to Ole Miss. That game was in Ole Miss, and they gave Old Crimson Tide everything they had. I mean, I was watching that game, and you could just tell Nick Saban was on the sideline, and you could tell it was one of those games. When it's one of those games, Nick Saban has a different demeanor on the sideline when he knows it's going to be a fourth quarter, last couple of possession games, and he had that demeanor. Because at first, the first quarter, I was like, okay, all right, cool, Ole Miss is in it, but when is Alabama going to turn around? The second quarter came when you're like, okay, the second half they'll turn around. The third quarter came when you thought, okay, there's a real chance that Ole Miss could pull this off. And again, you could watch Nick Saban's demeanor on the sideline. I was like, okay, yeah, he knows, we know that Alabama defense was bad. Both defenses were bad. I mean, both offenses, Alabama and Ole Miss, were basically able to score at will. And it was a fun game to watch if you're an offensive fan, because it was just back and forth. It was like watching a Big 12 game, really, is what it looked like. Not an SEC game. I still think Alabama, I mean, look, to be honest with you, it's Clemson, number one, easily. I think Clemson is right now, after especially what they did to Miami, who I think is a pretty good squad. What they did to Miami showed me that right now Clemson is the number one true team. I would say Alabama's probably number two, but not as close as I thought it was. Georgia probably number three, and even though they haven't played, I just don't know if I trust anybody else. I would probably put Ohio State number four. And again, I wouldn't even be surprised if that's your Final Four right there. I mean, I thought Florida maybe, but they lost. How about that? Texas A&M, talking about another upset, beating number 4 ranked Florida, who I thought could make a run at Georgia in the East, in the SEC East. I'm not so sure anymore, and I'm sure the SEC is hoping they don't because if Florida beats Georgia, they may only get one in the playoff. Of course, the way this year is going, I have no idea how the playoff's going to turn out. I think Clemson's easily in. I think Alabama's easily in. Then it's probably Georgia, Ohio State. You can put Notre Dame in that discussion. Florida's still probably there. Penn State, if they end up, beating Ohio State, Penn State would then be thrown in that discussion as well. Definitely going to be interesting, but normally at this time of college football season, you always know there's 3 or 4 really, really good teams. I just don't know. Outside of Clemson, I think anybody's really beatable. And I think Clemson's beatable, but after watching the Alabama game, I think everybody outside of Clemson can be beaten any week right now. I really do. I mean, Alabama showed that if you have a good game plan and you just need a couple stops. I mean, you need some things to go your way, but they can be beaten. And Georgia hasn't looked that spectacular either. I mean, they were in a fight in a fourth quarter with Arkansas, who I don't think is nearly as bad as everybody makes them out to be. I mean, they only lost to Auburn by 2 as well. But, Arkansas is not a top 10 team, and they were in a fight with them. So, but again, don't forget that there was, everybody didn't get those 1 or 2 or 3 games where it was kind of like that preseason, quote unquote, where you're facing non-conference lesser opponents. Right off the gate, you had to face conference. So it's a little bit different this year. That does make a difference. But, outside of Clemson, I just don't know if I would trust anybody week to week. I mean, I think I could truly pick Clemson every week and feel confident about it. I might pick Alabama every week, but I might not feel very confident about it because they're going to face some other good teams down the road here too. They're that are going to watch that Ole Miss film and learn some things. And Nick Saban's a great adjuster, great coach. I'm sure he'll learn from that tape as well. But I don't know if they can keep getting into those kind of fights every week and win all of them. So be interesting to see. Some games were announced. It was announced that the Week 1 Big Ten, Ohio State and Nebraska will be the Big Ten noon kickoff on Fox. And Minnesota and Michigan will be prime time on ABC at 7:30. I think that's going to be a really great game for both teams to kind of see where they're both at. I think Minnesota and Michigan are kind of on the same track. I think for Minnesota, Wisconsin is probably the best team in the West. And for Michigan, Ohio State's kind of that team in the East. I think Minnesota's probably closer to Wisconsin than Michigan would be to Ohio State. But what I'm meaning is I think this will be a good test for both teams. And, of course, the Little Brown Jug, the trophy, is at stake in this game. So, not only is there, bragging rights to win the first game of the season and be off to a good start at stake, the Little Brown Jug is also at stake. Michigan has won the last 3 meetings against Minnesota. And this will be their toughest game. I mean, look, Minnesota brought back Rashad Bateman, their top receiver. He decided to opt back in. Michigan did get Jalen Mayfield, their best offensive lineman, to opt back in. But Ambry Thomas, their best cornerback, is staying out. And though we haven't still, for some reason, heard official word on Nico Collins, that would tell me that he's not opting back in because we haven't heard anything on him. So they've probably lost. Michigan has lost their top receiver. But look, I think both teams. This is going to be a good kind of a good way to measure where both teams are going to be this year. Even if the loser, if it's a close game, could still feel confident. I think, especially for Minnesota, if Minnesota loses this game, I mean, they could still win the West. For Michigan, they could still win the East, but it'll be a good measuring stick for both teams to kind of see where they might be at for the 2020 season, because I think both teams are kind of equal on similar paths. So it should be a really good game. I expect it to be a good game. Hopefully for Michigan, they went with the right decision, and Joe Mixon. It's going to be. Look, I really believe for all these years, this could be the most. This will be the biggest decision of Coach Harbaugh's coaching career at Michigan. To go with Joe Mixon over Dylan McCaffrey, because I think a lot of people thought that McCaffrey was leader in the clubhouse. And I'm not saying that we don't know, But it did seem like it was McCaffrey's job to lose, right? I mean, we saw him the most last year in the backup role behind Shea Patterson. We saw McCaffrey the most. It felt like it was his job to lose. And hey, you know what? Maybe Joe Mixon deserved it and went out there and played his guts out this offseason. It sounds like to me Mixon won the job pretty clearly. I mean, there was people saying that he won it way early in camp, like it was easily decided. So I'm excited. I hope that they're right. And the reason I think it's a big decision for Coach Harbaugh is because I think you just don't want to be wrong on this, right? I mean, because if Joe Mixon has a down year and Dylan McCaffrey goes and transfers and becomes a superstar, I mean, that's going to be really bad look. So I hope for not only Jim Harbaugh, but I also hope for Joe Mixon, who I'm sure, look, nobody probably feels like they have more pressure on their shoulders than Joe himself because, there was a lot of people who were for McCaffrey. It was really interesting this past summer, right? I mean, felt like it was 50% for Dylan and 50% were for Joe. So, now Joe's got to win over that group that was with Dylan McCaffrey. But again, I never want to hype myself too much before the season because, there have been times where I've heard about, oh, this looks great or this looks great. It didn't end up looking very great. I've heard a lot of great things about Joe Mixon, and I hope they're right, but I'm not going to hype myself up too much to that until I actually see them on the field. So, again, Ohio State, Nebraska, noon Eastern on Fox. Minnesota, Michigan, the first game of the Big Ten week. Minnesota, Michigan on ABC primetime. Should be a spectacular game. I'm not surprised they put that on primetime because even though Ohio State's the golden child for the Big Ten, Michigan, Minnesota is going to be a much better game than Ohio State, Nebraska. All right, again, thank you to everybody who listened today. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for listening, whether you're listening on 12OnSportsRadioNetwork.com, Facebook, Twitter, wherever, Zingo TV, wherever you may be listening. Thank you very much for listening today to another episode of the JD Sports Show on 12 Ounce Sports. Again, thank you to all of our sponsors, MyBookie, Zingo, Fields Golf Course. Just want to thank everybody again for listening. I really do appreciate it. Remember, as I mentioned, mental health is a real thing. Don't judge somebody because you don't see it like that. Everybody sees the world differently. Again, thoughts and prayers go out to Dak Prescott. I hope for the best for him. We'll see you again next Monday here on 12 Ounce Sports. Thank you again for listening to JD Sports Show. Have a great rest of your week, everybody.
Hey, don't ever let somebody tell you you can't do something. You got a dream, you got to protect it. People can't do something themselves. They want to tell you you can't do it. You want something, go get it. Period.